Welcome back. And now for the news in detail, we start with Turkey, which says it has killed 277 terrorists in its Operation Peace Spring in northeastern Syria. Turkey's defense ministry says 49 were killed overnight, while one Turkish soldier lost his life during the campaign. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of civilians are fleeing the area as Turkish forces pound Kurdish fighters' positions for a second day. In response to Turkish bombardment, a barrage of shells from the Syrian side rained down on Archeology. The heavy fighting has sent panicked civilians on both sides of the border fleeing. The UN says hundreds of thousands of civilians in northern Syria are now in harm's way. Syrian media says 11 civilians have been killed during the operation. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump has offered to mediate between Turkey and the Kurds. Trump threatened Ankara with very tough sanctions, including financial curbs, if it crosses red lines drawn by Washington. In a series of tweets, President Trump said he has three options to choose considering the situation in Syria. He said these include sending troops and winning militarily, imposing sanctions on Turkey, or mediating a deal. But he said the American people don't want to see the US military sent back into the region. Earlier this week, Trump ordered partial withdrawal of the US forces from northeastern Syria after a phone call with the Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. In another development, the US says it did not block the United Nations Security Council consensus statement against Turkey. The explanation came after a closed-door meeting of the UNSC over Ankara's Syria's incursion. In a joint statement following the meeting, Britain, France, Germany, Belgium and Poland expressed deep concern over the Turkish military operation. US envoy to the world body warned Ankara of consequences if it does not play by the rules. In a statement, US mission to the UN said it does not endorse Turkey's military incursion in Syria. The US mission said Ankara is now responsible on the failure to protect vulnerable populations. It said Turkey will face consequences if ISIS resurges in Syria. While Germany strongly condemned the ongoing operation, the US and Russia did not use the word condemn in their statements. Syria says it will confront all foreign invaders. Speaking in Damascus, Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad asked the world to force Turkey to stop invading northern Syria. Mekdad said the Syrian army is fighting terrorist groups across the country and will fight any invading forces. He said Ankara's incursion contradicts its guarantees for the political process in Syria. Mekdad said the Syrian Constitutional Committee cannot function if Turkey kills innocent people.
The peace process in Syria is based on the resolution endorsed by the United Nations, which says that the Syrian people will decide the peace process and that Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity should be respected.
On Wednesday, Turkey started a military campaign in northeastern Syria to eliminate the Kurdish forces of the Syrian Democratic Forces. Moving on, in a related development, NATO says it is seriously concerned over Turkey's ongoing operation against Kurdish forces in northeastern Syria. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has asked Ankara to observe maximum restraint in its Operation Peace Spring. Speaking alongside Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, Stoltenberg said Ankara must ensure that the progress against ISIS is not jeopardized. Stoltenberg said NATO must find a sustainable solution for ISIS prisoners in Syria. Çavuşoğlu said he has told NATO that the alliance should show strong solidarity against threats to Ankara's security. Meanwhile, European Council President Donald Tusk said Turkey's actions in Syria may lead to a humanitarian crisis. Iran says one of its oil tankers was hit by missiles in the Red Sea. National Iranian oil company says all crew on board are safe and the ship is in stable condition. State media said the damage to tanks has been fixed and the oil leak has been stopped. The Houthi rebels have offered Yemen's government a second prisoner swap of 2,000 detainees. The offer comes after over 250 Yemeni soldiers were freed by the rebels last month. Houthi spokesperson says the gesture is aimed at easing tensions in the region. Head of the Houthis' Prisoner Affairs Committee, Abdul Qadir al-Murtada, said the exchange could happen as early as next week. Murtada said Houthis are waiting for the other side to respond. The Houthis also offered to stop launching missiles and drones at Saudi Arabia if the coalition ends airstrikes on Yemen. The Saudi-led coalition has yet to respond to ceasefire offer, but senior Saudi officials say they see this as a positive development. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has denied that US President Donald Trump tried to blackmail him. Talking to media in Kiev, Zelensky said he is ready to probe any Ukrainian interference in the 2016 US presidential election. Last week, the US Congress launched an impeachment inquiry against Trump. It accused him of blackmailing Zelensky to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden. The Ukrainian president said he is also open to a joint investigation into Burisma. He accused Russia of delaying a summit aimed at resolving the Donbass conflict between Kiev and Russian-backed forces. US President Donald Trump says the negotiations to reach a trade agreement with China went well. The world's top two economies have locked horns in a tariff war that has alarmingly slowed down global economy. China's Vice Premier Liu He headed the Chinese delegation to Washington for the dialogue. The US was represented by Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer in the talks. Talking to reporters after the talks ended, Trump said Washington had a very good interaction with the negotiators from Beijing.
We just completed a negotiation with China. We're doing very well. We're having another one tomorrow. I'm meeting with the Vice Premier over at the White House, and I think it's going really well. I will say, I think it's going really well.
Talking to media after the talks, Liu He said Beijing is willing to cooperate with the US on the trade balance, market access, and investor protection. Now, moving on, delegations from Japanese and South Korean governments have arrived in Geneva to settle their recently escalated trade row. The two countries are meeting at the WTO to solve a dispute over tighter export controls launched by Japan in September. South Korea says the tariffs violate World Trade Organization's rules. South Korea's delegations, led by Director General for Trade Chung Hae-kwan, were the first to arrive. The Japanese delegation is led by Trade Director General Kuroda Junichiro. China's President Xi Jinping is on his way to Chennai for a two-day informal summit with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Indian media reports that India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir and subsequent tensions with Pakistan will figure prominently in their discussions.
Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will spend 2 days together at a beach resort in Tamil Nadu. Informal dialogue is being held under the informal Wuhan process, which started 2 years ago after India backed down from a standoff with Chinese forces over the Himalayan state of Bhutan. Jinping and Modi are widely expected to discuss their long-standing dispute over the 3,500-kilometer India-China border. The two countries fought a 1962 war over the dispute, in which China prevailed over India. Last month, Chinese and Indian troops were involved in a standoff in Ladakh, a part of occupied Kashmir administratively separated from the valley by India on August the 5th. During a 2-day visit to Beijing by Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan, China strongly endorsed Pakistan's position on Kashmir and India's illegal change to the occupied valley's constitutional status. This jolted New Delhi, delaying the formal announcement of President Xi's visit to India. During Khan's visit, some analysts expressed expectations that Xi would discuss the prospect for the reduction of tensions between India and Pakistan. Indian media reports published today also say the Kashmir and India-Pakistan tensions are expected to be one of the focal points of talks between Xi and Modi. The summit in Tamil Nadu will conclude tomorrow.
On the other hand, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says he is puzzled over global media's apathy towards humanitarian crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Khan said the international media continues highlighting Hong Kong protests while ignoring Indian brutalities in occupied valley. Khan reiterated that Kashmir is an internationally recognized disputed territory illegally annexed by India. He said millions of Kashmiris are languishing imprisoned in their homes for over 2 months. He said thousands of people have been imprisoned, including politicians and children as young as 9 years of age. The Prime Minister said 100,000 Kashmiris have been killed in over 30 years. Meanwhile, a human chain will be formed in Islamabad today to express solidarity with Kashmiris. The Information Ministry said Prime Minister Imran Khan will lead the chain and address the participants. Climate change protesters from Extinction Rebellion group have blocked major thoroughfares in London. The demonstration is part of a 2-week worldwide civil disobedience activism to urge the governments to take climate action. The activists are holding placards and banners reading "Planet Before Profit," waving flags, singing and chanting slogans. They have camped outside the BBC headquarters, demanding them to fulfill a crucial moral duty to tell the truth about a climate emergency. They have also pledged to occupy Heathrow Airport terminal today. Police have arrested dozens of climate protesters as they block traffic every day in London. Activists have also expanded their blockade in central Paris, New York, Berlin and Sydney. It's time for a short break, but coming up next in the break. Two new archaeological sites found in Luxor. And fortress served as a torture site during communist rule. Welcome back. 3 people have died in China after an overpass collapsed onto a busy road in Wuxi city of Jiangsu province. Local authorities say 2 others have been injured in the accident. Officials said the collapsed flyover trapped 3 cars underneath. A rescue operation has been launched, sending firefighters, police and medical workers to the site. Authorities say an overloaded lorry might have brought down the bridge. In the US, the death toll from vaping-related illnesses has risen to 29. Health officials have confirmed almost 1,300 cases so far from a mysterious respiratory illness tied to vaping. Investigators have not linked the cases to any specific product or compound, but they have pointed to vaping oils as being especially risky. The serious respiratory illness has prompted a healthcare leading US officials to urge the people to stop vaping. New York City's landmark Empire State Building will open its newly renovated observation block on the 102nd floor tomorrow. The observatory features floor-to-ceiling glass windows where visitors can step right to the edge of the Art Deco skyscraper. Empire State Realty Trust CEO Anthony E. Malkin said all the obstructions have been removed to give the visitors an unrivaled view of the city. He said the observation deck is climate controlled and made up of 24 crystal clear, 8-floor tall windows. It allows 360 degrees views of the city. This is a part of the 3rd phase of the building's reimagined top to bottom observatory experience. As a part of a larger effort to ramp up tourism, Egypt has unveiled 2 new archaeological sites on the west bank of the Nile River in Luxor. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities says the discovery is a 3,500 years old industrial area, a first of its kind collection of artifacts. Let's take a tour of the place in this short report.
The mummy of Tutankhamun lies in the newly renovated tomb in Valley of the Kings as visitors click photos for their dedicatory albums. The clay products, a water storage tank, 2 silver rings and inlays used to decorate royal coffins are also exhibited for the sightseers. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities said the newly found industrial zone dates back to the New Kingdom's 18th dynasty, around 1300 BC.
But this is the first time that you see an industrial area to serve the workmen who work in decorating the coffins, to a workshop for making all this furniture and the artifacts, and KV65. First time really to reveal many secrets for the first time about the West Valley.
Hawas's team also uncovered a royal tomb that contained tools used in tomb construction.
I believe that it is the interest of the mummy to be at the museum. I believe that this mummy must go to the Grand Egyptian Museum. It will set forth a great educational process.
The discoveries are the latest that Egypt hopes will revive tourism business that has been hit by political instability.
The 2019 Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Norwegian Nobel Committee Chair Berit Reiss-Andersen made the announcement today in Oslo. Abiy Ahmed has been awarded for ending a 2-decade-long conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea. In the run for the award was Sweden's climate activist Greta Thunberg, UNHCR, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. A total of 301 individuals and organizations have been nominated this year. In most of our tourist wanderings, we wonder how the places would have looked and functioned in their prime years. In Ethiopia, a palace that was also served as a torture site under the communist regime will now open as a tourist attraction. The details in this report.
The palace compound in Addis Ababa, which Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government rebranded Unity Park, opens today. Abiy's office said on Twitter that the project symbolizes our ability to come together. Locals were fascinated to set foot inside a palace that had long been closed to the public.
For us, it's like a government house, So it tells us now, when you enter into the palace, it tells you that we are getting somehow closer to our leaders.
The restored rooms feature items like Menelik's sword and a life-size wax replica of former Emperor Haile Selassie. The palace is a culmination of the country's legacy and its culture.
This park represents Ethiopia. As I've seen earlier from the beginning, it represents all cultures that Ethiopia has. So this represents Ethiopia.
But the critics have dismissed it as a vanity project for Abiy that could prove divisive. They worry the palace could alienate ethnic Oromos whose ancestors were forced out of their lands.
Ahead of Tokyo Motor Show, Toyota Motor Corp unveiled a completely redesigned hydrogen-powered fuel cell sedan. Automakers are continuously faced with the monstrous challenge of producing fuel-efficient cars. This report has the details. Take a look.
Japan's biggest automaker has been developing fuel cell vehicles for more than 2 decades. According to Toyota, the new Mirai model boasts longer driving range and carries a completely redesigned fuel cell stack that doesn't emit carbon dioxide.
We didn't try to be different. We just designed a car based on how everyone would think it's cool and beautiful. That was our aim of our design.
Its sporty redesign with longer wheelbase and lower slung chassis is a marked departure from the first generation Mirai. The new car also has a 30% improvement in driving range over the previous iterations, approximately 700 kilometers.
We understand the Tokyo 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games Organizing Committee are hoping to make hydrogen fuels a legacy. We'd like to take this opportunity to showcase this car.
Costing consumers about 5 million yen, the original Mirai is one of 3 fuel cell cars available to consumers.
International oil prices have jumped by as much as 2% in response to a missile attack on an Iranian tanker in the Red Sea. Brent futures gained 2% shortly after the attack, but prices have since fallen back a fraction. Most European stock markets are trading higher, boosted by positive signals from ongoing trade talks between the US and China. The DAX index's Frankfurt has gained 1%, while Paris's CAC 40 index is fractionally higher. Earlier Asian stock markets enjoyed a stellar day because of investor optimism about US-China trade talks. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index led gains across the region, surging well over 2%. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index also picked up more than 1%. Now the weather temperatures from around the globe. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching in this news. For further updates, stay tuned.